Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Covenant Cast. I'm Zach.
And I'm Steven.
And I'm Jonathan.
And today, we design a game. All right, Jonathan, no, really, tell me what you did this week, and make it quick, because we have to design a game.
And make it fast. So some friends of ours, rented a cabin barn conversion, whatever you want to call it. I've been watching a lot of house shows recently.
All right.
Up in Arkansas, so we all went up there, and Robert was one of the people that went up, and he is a consummate weather watcher, and he said, oh my gosh, there's going to be weather of the rainy kind. We should bring stuff, indoor activities.
We've never done that otherwise.
Yeah, and so everyone just brought a ton of board games, and it was absolutely fantastic. I cannot tell you how exactly what I wanted that was. One of the board games that was brought, that I brought, was Captain Sonar, which I have bought and which was in the plastic, which I've been waiting for a group of 8 people to get together to play.
It's a lot of people.
We finally got to play it, and it was, oh my gosh, so much fun.
It's fantastic.
It was, yeah. Steven was on the opposing team. We lost. Steven won. But just whenever you start going into real time and you get that actual the radio operator on Steven's team was literally just sweating bullets trying to keep up with what was going on. I was the captain. I was trying to manage everything. It was really a fantastic.
Talking about a theme playing into a game, that felt like Submarines.
That sounds awesome.
I was there too, obviously, and also fell in love with a traditional game, which we talked about called Wahoo.
Oh,
the marble game,
yeah,
going around the board. And I found that fascinating because it was a game with no theme whatsoever, just marbles moving around. It's kind of like Sorry.
Yeah.
It's a really cool game. You probably have played it if you're from Chelsea.
There's about three decision points. And the rest is just being bandied about by fate. But sometimes that's what you want. You just want to get there, maybe have some sort of adult beverage next to you, and then just roll some dice and watch some marbles go.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
I get the sense that you're a folk game kind of guy.
I do like it, and I'm exploring whether or not I actually like games with no theme better than games with theme.
Interesting.
There's an element of freedom there that does appeal. What about you?
Cool. 4th of July, family holiday at this point in my life. During the weekend, though, nothing really significant, just relaxing. And ended up watching, there's a Netflix show called Glow.
Yeah, I've heard of this.
Gorgeous ladies of wrestling. And it's set in the 80s.
Where is Wafford?
Really? Yeah, that really changed.
Well, I will say, as a kid, my grandpa was really into wrestling, so I grew up into wrestling. And it was a pretty hilarious show because it's women wrestlers, but that was a while ago.
All right, cool.
Anyway, so we're going to actually get to this, which is we're going to design a game.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and we're going to do it on a single episode, which means we have, 30, 40 minutes to do this. Last week we asked our audience what theme they would like to see us design or game around. There were a lot of really great responses.
There were.
We'll save a lot for later, too.
Yeah, this is not our first attempt.
Assuming this doesn't just blow up and go awful.
Which it could.
No, fair warning. I've never designed a game in 30 minutes.
Even if it does, it is a learning experience for all of us.
Yeah, no, it'll be enjoyable.
You can't be good at anything you do the first time.
This one's straight up organic, guys.
We might also get 5% into the design of the game and then just be like, all right, episode over. Yeah. But, assuming we would like to revisit those games, and there's some fun ones, even like Princess Mononoke, I think is interesting.
That would be very interesting.
And just Ghibli stuff.
All sorts of stuff. But if you've been listening, as you might imagine, our friend Wap Caplets submitted a topic, which was grilling.
Oh, it was.
Which was grilling meats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were a couple. There were a couple of people who said.
I think this one, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, just to get our minds wrapped around this theme, is that this is ultimately the simplest, probably most straightforward concept that was pitched. It's pretty controlled, it's very focused, and so on the first outing, trying to design something, it's probably best not to go for it's some kind of hardcore Euro-style theme, like a new railroad-style game or space exploration game. But something more contained where we can really, try this, see how it goes.
Mm-hmm. And as a podcast topic, it's pretty relevant. We had a podcast about the meta in general, and the intro to that was about Steven's experience grilling meat.
Yeah, that's true.
And that was an analogy that carried over, and so
it also, I think, goes back to one of the questions that we were asked about a non-combat game. Mm-hmm. So it ties back into that, ties back into the theme. We'll try to get the player archetypes in there.
We're going to get to play with theme and mechanics here. It'll be... So, all right, so grilling meat.
Yes.
Let's dive in.
Application.
First thing is, what kind of game is this, and how do people win, right? Because if you're grilling meat, there's got to be a way for the players to
or even grilling, right? Maybe there's the vegetarian grill master, because those people exist. Hard to do,
100%.
but maybe
just
get
grilling
like
in
bonus
general,
points for your veggies. Here's what I'll say. So the one thing that I bring to the table with this game is a suggestion for win condition that is based off of that British show where they wander around entertaining each other at the various houses.
Come dine with me.
Come dine with me.
All right, tell me more.
So we watched Come Dine With Me, and the whole show is about who can entertain the best. And so there's a group of 4. They go to one house after the next. But here's the thing, and this is, I think, a really fun win condition that I haven't seen in a game. It probably exists, but I haven't personally seen it, is that you win by having the highest rating from your peers.
Okay.
So 4 people?
Or you could have 3. Maybe 3 could be the minimum number. But you would secretly rate the person's performance, and then whoever has the highest number at the end of the game, secretly you reveal all at once. And it's like, everybody thought that Steven grilled the best meal or Jonathan grilled the best meal. So I like that because it takes it from being super competitive and brings it into more of like just kind of a more relaxed community kind of thing where I can objectively say, oh man, look at how great of a job Zach just did or how great of a job Jonathan did, without considering how it might affect my chances of winning. So you have to separate yourself a little bit from competitiveness to play it correctly. But I think that's appropriate for this kind of like a backyard cookout kind of feel.
Sure.
Where we could do it 2 ways. You could do it a very hardcore like chili cook-off. I'm trying to win the championship, or you're hanging out with your friends and you have a friendly competition of who's going to create the best meal.
I really like that a lot. That reminds me, I feel like there was a wedding show like that as well, where like people went to each other's weddings, and then whoever had the best wedding got some special honeymoon.
There is that.
I don't know.
I was about to say there was a lot more cattiness in that one, but that is not correct.
No, there's plenty of cattiness and Come Down With Me.
Cattiness and Come Down With Me.
That's what the thing
It
about
was like 3 weddings, 4 weddings. I think it was called 4 weddings.
something like that.
But there was a period in my
life. I mean, they could be harsh on each other's weddings, but usually it wasn't like, you weren't directly harsh. It was like a hidden rating system. I actually like that a lot. So I was originally, when we agreed on, throwing around the idea of a grilling game, going the like cook-off direction, where you have like, judges or whatever that you're trying to impress. I actually very much like the idea of somehow impressing the other players.
Yeah, and it makes sure you're always playing, because even whenever other people are like doing things or showing off with either combos or whatever, you're paying attention and saying, okay, how did this person do? And then you could have, depending on how you did it, multipliers to that score. So you can start to manipulate that score in various ways, just to kind of like bring an element of control into it on your end as well.
Yeah, so that's what I was, where my mind's stuck right now is on that. How would people rate the stuff? Would there be, my first thought is there's some sort of baseline based on points that you can get by playing to the cards on the table or hidden information. My second one, this is out of the blue, but you could do almost an apples to apples Cards Against Humanity thing where you serve, or Snake Oil, where you serve people a certain amount of cards and then that's how they rate it. But I don't know, because I don't know how you would get an objective or subjective rating.
Well, you would just 1 to 10.
Okay.
Let's just start there, right?
Okay.
So everybody around the table, something happens. There's an event where you essentially reveal at the end of the game, and then we rate each other. Or maybe I do a thing, reveal, then you do a thing, reveal, you do a thing, reveal, and then there we have it. So it sounds like, and then let's say that's 70% of the ultimate score, 50% of the ultimate score. And then you have, depending on the combos and things you may have chained together, like secretly you could multiply that score to jump ahead even if you were rated lower.
Right.
So there would be a subjective component, which is your other players, and then an objective component, which is the game itself.
Okay.
Well, and you could even have the players have a set number of points they have to award.
That's true.
Where it's like, let's say there's 3 people, then I have two votes because I can't vote for myself, which is like a 1 and a 2.
Yeah, that would be
that
cool.
makes a lot of
And
sense.
it's like
that
so,
better. I like
so
that better.
if you have rounds that are happening, each round you're getting scored by all your peers, and they have to assign someone max points, and it's secret, right? And so there's this element of like, mechanically, I almost want, for some reason, because like if it's just subjective, then all of a sudden I know Jonathan's ahead in points, or I think he's ahead in points.
Yeah, but you just gotta not do that, you know.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think of a way to mechanically like
protect against it.
Protect against
Yeah.
it, but
That's
we'll get to
fair.
that.
Yeah.
So, but I like the idea of like having to vote on each player. That's what they did in the wedding like
First,
show,
second,
which
third,
was
fourth.
like
Yeah, that's fair.
you have to pick,
Okay.
and then based on like either 4 can be a lot of points, or you can be trying to get the least number of points, kind of a thing. If you get a 1, like golf kind of scoring system.
All right.
But
All right, so basically
End of round voting.
the win condition is being rated highly by your peer, the highest rating, combined rating by your peers, potentially with a multiplier. So we're dealing in essentially kind of points, the classic, game currency. So ribbons, which might act as a multiplier or a base score that then would determine your final score. All right, that makes sense. So we did it. It's a win condition.
Game over.
Going to be a competitive game, but taking a little bit of the cutthroat out of it because you are having to actually be nice and award your competitors with truly a subjective assessment. And you must do that. And so there we go. We've done that. What's the win condition? There it is. How do we get there?
So, first thing I'm thinking is imagining having a deck that's like the game has a deck, and like if you imagine you had a deck of cards, and then at the start of a round, it's like 2 or 3 things come up, whatever that is, and these are effectively the rules by which we are now ranking how people perform this round.
Okay.
Where it's like maybe it's just 1 card that comes up, but it's like prepare the best vegetarian thing, or
like
use beef,
smoked something. Oh yeah,
or use beef and Oreos,
yeah.
or chocolate.
Oh,
and
that
like,
would be maybe these are ingredients.
Yeah, that's what I was
The
thinking.
ingredients could come down, and so let's say you have a spread of 5 ingredients, and whoever utilizes those in a certain kind of way would get a higher score.
Well, and that's I'm trying to think of like, because if we get a vote on who did this thing the best, then you have, instead of it just being I think you did the coolest thing over there, because like in Cards Against Humanity, right, it's like which one of these is funniest.
Yeah.
And everyone can determine which one of these pairs of words was funniest. When it comes to like somehow we're putting together a meal, or even if we think we're hosting people at a grilling thing, but I'm not sure. I almost feel like the ingredients should come from the player, where it's like the deck you have constructed somehow, and you may construct it in a game. It could end up being a deck builder, but
Or you could also have secondary ingredients and treat this more like a Texas Hold'em sort of thing, where this is a universal hand that everybody uses.
And then how are you going to complement it with what's in your own hand? And honestly, I like the idea, for simplicity's sake, of that being the same deck, like that we're drawing from the same deck that we're dropping cards out of. That makes it way simpler. Where maybe every turn, we get to use 3 cards out of ours and 2 cards on the table, and then we replace 3 from here, replace the 2 onto the board, and so we have one big kind of pile of ingredients, and maybe there's even random variables in here, like rained out, like that kind of stuff. Now you have to cook without a grill or something. Like
that's hilarious. So how?
That seems pretty accessible, right?
I guess the question for me with that is, which I really like, and I actually could see it being almost like a trick-taking kind of game, where these are consumable things, and like you win by collecting cards that like stack up into points at the end of the game or whatever. Because I'm trying to get back to, if players are voting on like how I did, how are we wanting players to arrive at that vote, right? Like in
exactly.
Cards
How
Against
do we get
Humanity,
there?
it's which is funniest,
Right.
Which one made me laugh the most.
Right.
In this game, that's I think the next condition we have to kind of solve, which is how are you going to give me 2 points versus Steven 1?
Right.
Yeah, that is a good question. Why would you rate a person higher or lower? If there's that subjective element to it, then there has to be some kind of a assessment that's made that doesn't have to do with how you performed at the game, because the game would tell you itself that you did good or bad.
It has to be outside of points, basically outside of numbers.
Yeah. If we're wanting the voting part to happen, because I was even thinking about.
Oh man.
Well,
so we could have a. This is weird. There could be. It's kind of a non-subjective take on this, but maybe you, when you're judging, are a part of the taster group. So you're a taster and a chef, but that you have a hidden set of preferences or like things that you're looking for in a dish. And the game is kind of about us trying to figure out and hone in on trying things. Like I'm going to try like a spicy broccoli dish. And then if I get the gold from Jonathan, it's like, I think he likes spicy food. So maybe next time he's tasting, like now I'm going to bring out a lot more spices. And like you have a role maybe that you're playing that like prefers spicy
That could be
dishes
cool.
or
So if
those
you had
kinds
like
of
a hidden
things.
role that determined how you voted,
Yeah.
where it's
Yeah.
like, you rate highly spice and health, right? And you have things that are being put together, and so people are in some way getting cards to build this meal, and then it's like, well, which of these meals best suits
Yeah.
and you could even have it. I'm thinking about Viva Java, where like you have a rating of the beans, the strength to the weakest. But I'm thinking about like if you had qualities, right? Like health, taste, because something that tastes better probably is less healthy.
Yeah.
You could even have like spice or whatever, just these different qualities, and they're ordered on your secret player card, and you may only have 3, and they're ordered,
Yeah. What's
and it's
most
like
important to you?
the meal that is closest to this
Yeah.
gets the most points, right? And that's going to be hard to like closest to, but it's like,
But that's where that subjective thing comes in too.
yeah,
Where it's like, well, he did a spicy main dish, and spice is my number 2. Zach had a sweet secondary dish, and sweet is my number 1. So now I have to be like, what was better ultimately? Like in kind of not a role play kind of way, but just, would I have preferred that sweet cake that Zach served up, or that spicy tuna that Jonathan?
what would
pulled
my
off the
character
grill?
have preferred?
And how well was that tuna cooked, and like how well was the cake cooked, and those kinds of
Yeah,
things.
because it could even be they could have particularities where it's like, health is number 1, taste is second, spice is third, and then it's like also prefers undercooked meat.
Yeah,
Right?
weird stuff.
And it's
You
like,
could have,
whatever the case is, or
Yeah.
like is a sucker for dessert.
Yeah.
Like if someone is whatever score on the sweet scale, that's got to be the
Love
winner,
it. I
or
love
whatever. So then I actually think one thing that could be cool to make this really simple, as I'm thinking about it, is imagine if you had like 5 ingredients out at a time, and a round consists of building a meal, right? Putting together its ingredients that go with and we can work on that in a second. But I imagine like I take one, and then you take one, and then Jonathan takes one. So these 3 are gone. That's your first thing. And then after we've all gone once, you refill. And now, starting with you, and you go around until you have a certain number of cards.
So you're basically, you're drafting, you're pulling in.
You're basically like,
it's like you're shopping.
yeah, you're
This is your
shopping. You go into the shop.
This
Yeah.
is the grocery store.
Yeah.
So we're shopping because like I've seen like food truck wars and those kinds of things, right? They have this challenge, and they have to. A lot of times, I have to spend money to get the ingredients. Should we have a resource to this?
Which we might get to.
Should we spend some cash
So-
to get the good? Because
Yeah,
I could double
yeah,
down on like
right.
a great prime rib, or I could spend very little money on like broccoli and rice
vegetables and stuff.
and invest everything in spices and
And you can add a dessert.
yeah, because
or
this
not
is
have a
really what you
dessert.
have to consider when you're cooking.
Yeah,
for
and so I
people.
think I'm imagining the cards the way they would look, right? Like one is like ground beef, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I'm gonna get ground beef, and then it's like, well, cinnamon pops out as a spice, and it's
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna spice this up, right? And it's
Yeah.
like +2 to the spice.
Yeah.
Then sugar might come up, and it's like +1 to the sweet, and so you're building this like offering, and then after a certain amount of time, you're gonna make an offering, and then based on what I think I would like to do is have a point value on each card, and based on your character that no one knows, and we're trying to figure
tasting.
out the taster. You, instead of like, and it may not be a point value, it may just be number of cards, but it's like if a meal ends up being like 5 cards, then it's like give half rounded down of your cards to whoever you have to vote for, and then throw the rest away, and it's like you're just trying to collect cards. Like
So
this
now
is the
whoever has
score.
the most cards at the end of the game
Yeah.
would win.
And it could be that like, the different cards have different point values, and it's like, shuffle, whatever. But in some way, making the score tied to collecting the cards.
Check this out too. You could also have the voting component tied to cash. So as your meal gets rated by the other people highly, that gives you basically you get first place or whatever it is. And so now maybe you take cash from the bank, like you're awarded $150 because you won this round of the cook-off. Or maybe your judges give you like some of their money because we all pitch it in at the beginning, like wager on the meal, and then you take the cash if you win the prize.
Actually, so I really like that. I think, what if it was like, imagine on the card you have like, the art of the ground beef or the broccoli or whatever,
ground beef
with like its stats over here, sweetness, sour, health, whatever it is, and then you can upgrade it. But then on the card itself could be both the cost of it to grab it, and then also a value, like a monetary spend value. And so like as you're collecting the cards, that's how you're building cash, and you have to spend that cash to get more things, to basically keep going. It's like it almost becomes an economic engine that you're building. With some goal of like get to X amount of cash.
Okay, so we've got a couple of ideas. We've got tasting rolls. So this would be, it wouldn't necessarily be characters. I mean, if you had enough of them, it would work. But because it's kind of hidden information, we could also just construct, basically you draw, 5 taste cards at the start, and those are just static. They stay with you and they tell you what your preferences are and maybe what you're more inclined to. So we have like the tasting thing, which kind of helps the subjective assessment of the meal. We have potentially the shopping / money challenge of it, where you're buying ingredients. You have potentially a split between food and spices. So it could be that maybe food's on the board and you have spices in your hand, spices on the board, you have food in your hand, or maybe you buy both. You've also got this idea of collecting cards as an indicator of success, basically. Success. And then the easiest thing, of course, would be to just say that whoever has the most money wins at the end of the game, right?
Yeah.
So if you're stingy, if you can do a lot with a little, then you will do just as well as somebody who buys all the best food. So maybe that would be a nice balancing mechanism.
That's where I kind of like that as a balance, because I can imagine once I figure out Jonathan is like spice is his thing, and once I figure out that like sweet is your thing, if I can now construct a meal that hits both of you, I can get way more. And so I may aggressively go after certain ingredients, and I also can go after ingredients that I know you guys want.
Yeah, and if I've identified Jonathan's spice and like you were here, I'm like, I'm gonna steal the spiciness.
You need the spice, but then all of a sudden it's like maybe you didn't get any meat.
But there is, so one of the things I think would be very interesting is, first of all, these obfuscated preferences that we've been talking about and trying to figure those out. And not just having a list of preferences, but potentially having a list of dislikes as well. And so if I like something that's super spicy, but you make a dish that's super spicy for the entire crew, right, and for the entire dinner party, and it turns out Steven gives you super low ratings, well, even though that's my number one, you can get a lot of points from me, it negates it because Steven's character doesn't like the spice. And so you're actually trying not to maximize, but to like get the best that everyone will like.
That would be fascinating, and that is way more like what it is to entertain a cooking event like that.
And I think you could have different strategies to win that, because it's like I could try to get I could try to win yours, or I could try to make one that appeals to the table, depending on how many people there are. And I could also, the part of why I like having some kind of money stat on it that you win on the cards is like, if I see you taking the cards that have the big money values, now I want to start winning yours. Yours is worth more than Steven drafting broccoli over here. Because if there's $5 on the broccoli, but $50 on the steak, and you pick steak, and then there's $5 on the cinnamon, $30 on the cannoli. Now all of a sudden everyone knows that your hand is worth a lot more to win.
So they're trying to get a hold of me.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so you have this competitive thing happening, but at the same time I might win these 3 over here. Kind of a situation.
Boy.
And there's a lot of particulars, but I think, so if we're locking in some things really quick to kind of move forward with those, having all of the stuff you're using to prepare a meal in a central deck, in the kitchen or in the grocery store, or whatever you want to call it, coming out with us somehow purchasing or getting those.
Acquiring the cards,
I think makes a lot of sense. I think each person getting either a set of preferences and dislikes, and that could be cool, right? Where it's like you get 5 cards, and it could be preferences or dislikes or
you could even just choose them too. Like if you wanted to actually be like, this is what I want to play this time around.
Yeah.
I think it's also very easy to base those on the taste, salty, sweet, umami, whatever, and then plus healthy, and maybe a couple more.
Yeah, sweet, sour, all that kind of
But-
stuff you're saying.
in short, you're getting cards, and it could be you get 10, choose 4, and you get that way you get to kind of decide how you want to play it or whatever. But you have the preferences and dislikes as a player. So we have a thing where we're collecting ingredients, preferences and dislikes, and you score points or get further towards your victory condition from better serving the rest of the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's just link it to money for now. Let's just say that money is the currency. That's the reward, that's what you're bidding, that's everything is money. All right, so moving on. Another aspect of this is, I think an important aspect of cooking is equipment.
Yes.
Right?
And skill.
So we're talking about maybe you spend money to upgrade a pan. Maybe you spend money to buy an awesome grill, an oven, a wok. And that opens up different types of dishes that you might then be able to prepare. So the question to me at that point becomes, is this a game of recipes? Ultimately, like this feels a lot more traditional, where I might like a deck builder style game where if I'm gunning for a couple of recipes, maybe they come out of the grocery store or whatnot, and then it's like needs wok, soy sauce, teriyaki, and then I can make chicken lo mein or whatever. I could spin that out. I think that's overly restrictive. Like I don't like. I want the freedom of like kind of cooking how I want. But what would the equipment do in this kind of a game?
So I was thinking about ways that we could include the skill of cooking in there. One of the first things that came to mind, and this is we're starting to get a lot of decks on the table at this point.
Well, we just got to get all the ideas out there.
But if you had a potentially first idea, one deck, and the deck has cards that says cooked poorly, grill malfunction, whatever, or cooked well, that kind of stuff. And the better equipment that you have, the more draws in that deck that you get.
There you go.
Right?
Yeah.
Or you have a deck for each major piece of equipment. So if you're doing it on the grill, it has X, Y, or Z possibilities. If you're doing it in a wok, it has A, B, or C possibilities. And so that way each set of equipment has its own personality, and you could maybe even, like if you have a spicy dish with a curry powder and you use a wok, like then something magical happens. Like you draw a card that says, if your recipe uses curry powder, you give it +1 to well cooked. And that would just be, my idea, that would be just a basis to your points. So if you cook something well, even if someone doesn't like it, it's still like worth 1 or 2 points extra than what it would be.
I could also see if we wanted it to be simpler, including things like that in the same deck. Where maybe it's a little less frequency.
This
but
is just like the store.
It's like the store. It's where you're getting all your stuff.
So you get the equipment and the food.
So then, like some foods though, may not be playable unless you have certain equipment.
Or they're even better.
Or like the equipment. Like if you get a really nice grill and you spend money on it, all of a sudden any meat that you cook is +5 taste. Or whatever the case may be. So you may end up. And to me, it would almost be like equipment is like I get a grill and then it's there. Like
I want them out, and then I want to be able to upgrade them a little bit too, maybe. Yeah, that's potential. I guess you probably don't need that as much though, because you could be doing like propane, charcoal, wood fire.
You could
smoker.
You could have the base cards come out here, and then the option to upgrade is always just an option that you have for money.
Like if you just put another one on it?
Yeah, like it doesn't even need to come out. It's just like, I have a grill and I've got extra cash, so I'm getting a better grill.
That's fair.
Like that's what I can do with
certain cards up here.
Well, I mean, even just on the card, if put X resources on this card, it gets +1 to draw.
Upgrade.
Yeah.
Or times 2 its cost to upgrade every time.
Yeah.
And then it gives you, okay, so what is it? We haven't really settled on what the equipment does. Right, so let's say that we have like pots, pans, smoker, such. So that brings me to one of the other elements of cooking, which is time management. Right, so if we think about really what is it to cook a meal, the things that you have to consider are the equipment that you have, the taste preferences of your audience, the money that it's going to cost to buy the ingredients that you need, and then making it all come out on time, right? So that made me think, because if I'm thinking of, well, I'm going to buy the smoker, and when I do that, I have like a 95% success rate on anything being great, but
It takes forever.
It takes 24 hours or 12 hours or 16 hours. So is there a way to manage time as well? I think those are the 4 elements that have to be managed.
What's the ones
When I'm thinking about cooking. So equipment. So think about like when you're about to like host people.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I need to make sure that I have what I need to cook the thing.
Right.
I need the ingredients themselves. That includes essentially food, spices. And then sometimes it might be like oil and peripherals. Not necessarily important. But we'll get there. Equipment, ingredients. Then you have to have the palate of your guests. And then you have to have the actual time.
Preparation.
Managing the time, basically. So when do I start the mashed potatoes?
Right.
Given when the meat is cooking and the cranberry sauce in the oven or whatever.
And I think that this is where we could maybe introduce a little skill into this, which is maybe when you take a card, right? Maybe that window is like your action, where like I can either take a card or play a card. And so like I might be collecting stuff at the store. So I'm getting some cinnamon and some beef and some rice. And then it's like, but maybe to even make the rice, I need a rice maker. And so one of the actions might be put the rice in the rice maker. And like do this. And somehow the turn is going to end. And I don't know, maybe it's like...
All right, here's what I'm thinking.
It's getting there.
This is, so you have the ingredients, you have the stuff that you're using to cook the ingredients. Let's say you have your rice cooker, to use your example. You put the rice in it, right? At the time you put the rice cooker and the rice in it, you put X amount of tokens based on it's on the rice cooker
How
card,
long it needs to cook.
Right, and then every turn you take a token off. Once you take all the tokens off, then you start putting on different color tokens because it's starting to spoil. Right, and so you want to serve it with as few. You can't serve it under token. You can't serve it when it's getting cold.
That's really clever.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm almost wondering if you have an ingredients deck, which is all the stuff you might buy at the store ingredient-wise, and then you have a set number of like equipment items over here, which cost money, and some of them are expensive, like the Grill Master at $87,000. Which lets you smoke and grill and cook potatoes and do whatever. But these are just like static, like you can always buy this kind of a thing. And so you can always spend an action, take your money, grab a piece of equipment. And so early in a game, you're going to need to start thinking about the equipment you're going to want to use to make the food you're going to want. But that's also hard because like, what if John's preference is rice? And like, I don't buy the rice maker.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. But
Yeah.
if you have the equipment, because then part of it is like, do I want to take an action to get the beef I need?
I think having to choose between equipment and ingredients, having to choose between any of these 4 things should be kind of a critical thought.
You're doing.
Where it's like, if I know that Jonathan likes this thing, I want to get that ingredient, but I also need this equipment for next time whenever I'm cooking for Zach. And I don't want Jonathan to steal the wok that I need because I have a bunch of bok choy.
So you have a lot of decisions to make.
Yeah, so I want it to be... And here's playing Captain Sonar really amplified this for me, is having like a real-time component in a game can be exceedingly fun. Now, so here is the impractical and impossible version of what you were talking about, where it's like, let's say this is not possible. I recognize. But let's say that you have 5 different hourglasses. 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, or like 3:52, whatever it is. And whenever you like play something, let's say you have a 5-minute turn when it's your turn to cook. We have like maybe a drafting section for a while, and then it's like, all right, Steven's up, he's cooking. We start the clock, and then when you put something out, it tells you how long it takes via that hour, like what kind of hourglass you're supposed to put on it. So like at the smoker is like, boom, I lay down my 3-minute hourglass and it starts ticking. Now I've got to be like, okay, and then I got to get the rice going over here, put a 2-minute on there, and I'm trying to get them all to come out at the same time. And that would be exceedingly stressful, which I think is hilarious. But the token thing that you're talking about is entirely more practical.
Well, and what
I just don't know a way to do it with turns.
They could do Sorry.
You're good. I was just going to say, I think one way we could add that time element in, I do think having tokens and having it timed where things are ready at a certain point, where it's like, your beef takes 3 turns to cook. So you have to put it on, and then it's like your rice takes 2 or 4. So you put that on the turn before you put the meat on. But the time element to me is basically you have this moment when someone's meal is ready, right? Like you get your grill, you get your maker, you get your rice in, you get your meat in, all of it's coming out, and you're like, done. Meal's done. That means you're exiting the round.
Okay.
But at that moment, I think it should start a, not literal timer, but it's like every player has within so many turns of that to finish.
That way, the better you are at cooking, then the more pressure you put on everybody else.
So, and you can cook a simpler, faster meal, but then it's like, hey, as soon as someone clocks out and has a meal ready, and here's what it means to have a meal ready, right? You have 3 more turns or 5 more turns or whatever the case may be. And then it's like, well, now I'm done buying equipment. I got to start cooking. And I got to cook what I can cook, right? It's like, chicken, go on. Broccoli, go on. Let's get this out.
No, that's,
but
that's a really good way to
you
bring
could be
it in.
sitting there with like, I always have the like, if I need to cook a meal in 3 turns, I can. If something goes wrong, I can. In the meantime, I'm building. And so early, you might be sitting on chicken and broccoli in the grill to cook it, and potatoes. And you can do that in 3 actions. But you can also be going for these more complex servings.
I really like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, you can even play, obviously undercooked chicken, there's a huge penalty for.
Sure.
Undercooked
well, and like
broccoli,
you could
maybe
just
not
miss,
so much.
right?
Yeah.
Like on the bake-off stuff, it's like your biscuits just didn't rise,
Yeah.
or your rolls didn't rise,
Yeah.
you're done.
So should we also? I think we should seal this up. Like I feel like we're pretty much ready to
We're
start
actually getting there,
kind of doing it. So we have. Let's just say, for the sake of simplicity, we would have a deck of food and a deck of equipment. Is that fair? Are we just okay with that?
Sure.
They could potentially be the same deck. That would be like a testing thing to see if we could get the ratios right, where you have enough of each to make it happen.
Yeah.
So actually let's say we have 3 decks. Because we have food, equipment, and taste.
Oh,
but
yeah,
taste only
taste.
happens at the beginning. But let's just be thorough here.
Which I like that.
Yeah. And taste.
And we can arrange
and then the
that
4th
and
element, which
whatever.
is time, is part of the mechanics of the game.
And then we have money, of course. So you got 3 decks. You got your money tokens, and then you got your spoil.
Cooking and spoiling tokens.
Yeah, that can be front and back. So you could have like red for cooking and like a black for spoiling or something.
Black or green. Green or purple.
Well, and I think on the money too. So it's sort of like in Monopoly has the house money. I think to simplify it, the money could be on the cards. Granted.
Yeah, it could be.
But I think even if you just had a pool of money, and it's like you start the game with 10 money, and like the goal is get to 30 money.
Yeah.
30 total points. So you're spending money to buy stuff, grill, equipment, materials. You could even have it naturally players get 3 money at the start of a turn. So you can't just like spend all your money and then now you can't buy ingredients or prepare meals or do whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
So you have a certain amount of money, and then basically players get to award money to the person who best hit their taste needs.
And let's be fair, I think that you could open up the possibilities of playing the game in a way that you're also attempting to like entertain at the same time. But the question there is, are we all cooking at the same time? Or is one person kind of putting on the show while everybody else is kind of like enjoying? Because if we do the second one, if one person, then that leaves other players that can manage other things like time, right? So one player could, when it's not their turn to cook, be saying, every turn, like every 30 seconds that goes by, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3. The other player could be managing random events or weather or something like that. So you could have
There's rain.
You could have a collaborative experience, and that way everybody, even while you're not cooking, you are involved in the game, but you're paying attention. Because I like the idea of paying attention.
Well, so
to
you
somebody's
could.
performance.
I mean, you could. If everyone wasn't cooking at the same time, that would take away the idea of whenever somebody stops, everybody has a couple more turns. But it would make it incredibly available to like set a timer.
Yeah.
And let's say every minute it would be 3-player minimum, or even I guess 2-player minimum, where you have one person who is the shop owner, and one person who is, the grill watcher, let's say, and all right, I'm going to start cooking this, then it's their job every 30 seconds to add or subtract. And then if you need to do an interaction at the store, you have to go to this person. That way, everyone keeps each other honest without anyone trying to sneak anything in. Plus, that would be like, one, I love heckle dinners where one person is cooking and everybody else is heckling them. And two, it would give you that real-time stress of trying to get the food cooked in time.
Mm-hmm. And you could try to psych the person cooking out by having conversations with them and be like, oh, how's it going in there? How's the beef coming along?
How's your mom? They're just cooking.
I think having the player or more than one player available to manage things when they get in the cooking device. So, this person has put the meat in, they've moved on, you can just start putting the tokens on every 30 seconds.
Yep.
And so I've got to come back over here and look at it and be like, okay, it's got 4 tokens on it. I've got a couple minutes there, and so then I continue on. Gives us the real-time thing. It gives us, everybody has a little bit of buy-in to the success of the person, but also can heckle them in a way that kind of causes problems, which I like. So any group could play it in whatever way they felt like they wanted to play it, which would be exceedingly fun.
Yep.
So
now the one big problem I have left is conceptualizing the subjective part of this. Because objectively, I think I just veer towards that because I like objective judgment a lot better. If you're just looking at your taste cards that are secret to you and then you're saying, here's my score, figure out why it's that way, I understand that. I have trouble figuring out how the subjective part's coming in. So if there's any, we can either keep it and discuss it or we can drop it.
You're saying how it is subjective?
Yeah, how it would be subjective.
Yeah.
Because we could just do the taste thing,
well,
and it's like...
that was kind of the trick for me was, early on, it was how, as in Cards Against Humanity, it was which one made you laugh more. But in this case, you're not actually tasting the food. So you can't say which one of these tastes better.
Right.
So I don't know that it can be subjective.
There would have to be another element that you're judging. Basically, it would be like the entertainment factor or the
ingenuity of the recipe.
Ingenuity, how your creativity.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That does have potential for abuse.
Certainly.
So,
which I don't think anyone playing the grill game is gonna.
I mean, that's the thing. Even on Come Dine With Me, you could potentially have anybody who wanted to give ones to anyone but them, but they don't, right? Because you what's the point of that?
Yeah,
right?
well, because it would come back to you as well, I think.
Yeah,
but it would also be, if someone, if you serve a meal and you get a low score, and you're like, hey, why'd you give me that score? It's like, well, I couldn't give you a higher score because of my taste. That's interesting interaction.
Now, two things. The second, more like Captain Sonar version that we're postulating, it seems like a very different. There's two very different things happening.
That's a little bit more intense Iron Chef style.
Which I'm not against.
Situation.
I think that could be hilarious, especially at a real dinner party. The second thing is. I don't remember what the second thing was. I
guess
got off on that.
If you're going to give a subjective, there is probably the more laid back, you're describing the dinner that you've prepared. You're saying look at this beautiful duck cinnamon soup that I've made. And then everyone's, and you try to convince everybody of how good this is and how much time it took.
You could go like a snake oil route on that.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
You can even give people personalities and be like, hey,
here's your free range duck soup. So that may be the more party game version of this, where you're helping your friends kind of understand where you're coming from and just trying to do kind of absurd things that you get away with. But the more kind of gotta make it happen kind of thing is
I like that idea of balance, the amount of balance required in spending your actions on getting an ingredient when it's the thing you need, buying the equipment when you need the equipment. Maybe the only thing that was there was rice. 5 rices come out, and it's like, well, the rice maker's going to get bought right now. And also balancing that against preparing your meal. We're like, well, I have to decide when to start cooking. Mid-cooking, I realized that I didn't grab the cinnamon. So now I have to spend part of my time getting the cinnamon. And then all of that whilst trying to figure out what the hidden preferences of your fellow people are is pretty intense.
That seems really good. Yeah, so let's take the subjective element out of it. I think that will be That would be a different game if we wanted that to be the focus. You could probably make it work. I mean, if we really put our minds to it. But it seems easier to build an engine than it does to build rules for people to not hammer each other.
Honestly, even in this case, it's like, let's say you have to award 3 money to whoever did it best.
Just do it like Mario Party. Just have like the random just superstar, or like, I really liked this person's attitude. Maybe you have like a little just ribbon of some kind to be like, I really appreciated just what you did here.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like, let everyone give up money to the person for a random reason.
Yeah.
It's like,
just what did you like?
It's like, I enjoyed watching you try to make that rice in time. Like, that was hilarious. So here's your money, so that you're incentivizing something else entirely.
Yeah.
And because we talked about the reasons people play games on previous episodes, and it's like, who's having the best time. And it's like, you may be bad at cooking, but like, it's hilarious to watch. So here's a money this round.
Maybe you could even start the game with like 2 tokens, and throughout the game you can give away up to 2 of these that are worth like 5 bonus bucks.
Sure.
To the cook.
Or you could even do something as simple as have that pre-built, depending on testing and stuff. You could have one most fun to watch a card, right? It's just like I'm gonna give you my most fun to watch card for the game because that was great, and then you get 2 money every time.
Who made the most impressive meal?
Or like most impressive, chillest.
And that is subjective. This is subjective.
That's the way we should do this.
You have and maybe each player has it, or maybe you vote on it at the end of a thing, or whatever. But there is a subjective who is the most entertaining to watch? Who made the best meal? Who had the most fun? Who
most ambitious?
Worst cook.
Most ambitious meal. I like that.
We could have awards.
So we need awards. Yeah. That's the subjective element, is the awards.
Yeah. And I like the end of game bonus point things that get given out in any game. Like Takedo has the who saw the most stuff, who bought the most souvenirs, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I can see people going.
Yeah, definitely. Even if you're losing, it's like, if I really blow out this last meal, I could potentially get 3 of these cards from my peers.
Yeah.
That would be fascinating. Okay, I'm into that.
All right.
That solves the problem for me.
I mean, I think from a conceptual level, we basically have a game.
We just need to test it now.
We're pretty well there. All right, so let's run it down from the top.
Okay.
So when you start
a game,
shuffle up the 3 decks, so your equipment, your food, and your taste buds, I would say, or your preferences. And then let's say you draw 3 taste notes each. And so then you have those, you look at those, and you kind of keep those to yourself the entire game. And then at the end of the game, you'll reveal them in a grand display. Here's what I was looking for, those kinds of things. And you could even have you could go wild with those tasting things. Loves spice, hates duck, and then you make spicy duck. And it's like, why did you not like that? I thought this guy was all about spice.
Well, and I can easily, this is real life, it's like, doesn't like cauliflower. It's like, will not eat it, or shrimp, or fish. And it's like, I love sweet and salty, but you don't know that I hate fish. So you make a meal, it's got fish, I'm out.
Yep. And that's the amazing, you could even have one question to each person, at the start of the meal. It's like, how do you feel about beef? And then you're like, I love beef. It's like, sweet.
Well, and it's
so you could try to start narrowing it down.
You could even, right. You could. The thing about that though is if the 3 of us were playing and we all made a meal, then from that very first here's your points that you get awarded. It's like, well, Jonathan awarded Steven 3, and Steven had spicy fish with potatoes, and it's like.
It's so why did anyone ever cook spicy fish with potatoes?
Yeah, I know, right? But the reality is, you could have any combination. I think that's hilarious just because you are deducing it throughout a game.
Yeah, you just have to figure it out.
And, very, very quickly, though, and that's where, to me, I would almost want this game to last 4 or 5 rounds.
Yeah, easily.
Where, 1 and 2, you're kind of building and figuring out what people are doing.
Yeah.
Then by 3 and 4, you're really pushing into it. And then 5 and 6 is you either solved it or not.
Yeah.
But you can so easily imagine turn 6. I've got John pinned.
Yeah.
And then it's just can't stand pepper.
Yeah.
And then it's no. I'm gonna throw some pepper on this one. And then it's just nope, 0 points to you, sir.
So you have your tastes, and then we lay out probably X number of equipment cards, X number of ingredients, and then you start the game by getting maybe 1 equipment for free, and that's how you start.
I also think
everyone starts with a really basic grill.
Yeah, I also think that it's potentially on the equipment or the food, most equipment, I have an idea of like you can also buy techniques. And I also think that they should constantly refill. So that if you're in the middle of cooking and then some new ingredient or technique pops up and you want to take a risk on that, like it's up to you to make that decision very quickly. Like I might be able to get this on the grill fast enough to make it come in.
We'll make that a role of the observers whenever the other person's cooking. That would be another good role to have. So you grab your equipment, and then we have ingredients on the table. Those will get chosen, as we basically go around. So there's a bit of a draft situation going on, where we pick all of our stuff. We trade in cash for ingredients, and then we start the cooking. Right. So we start with one player. And then they begin, so a timer starts is what we're thinking, like a 30, let's say a 3-minute or a 4-minute, 3-minute timer I think is acceptable. Maybe 5, although that's a pretty long time in games.
I have to test that one.
Let's just say 5. Okay. And every 30 seconds, anything that's on a heat source goes up 1. A new card comes out in the grocery store, and a new piece of equipment becomes available.
So it clicks. So every 30 seconds there's a time click. And stuff turns over.
And that's where, if I'm cooking, you guys are managing that. So I got my equipment, I put my stuff down, and then there's an element of spices. And when those happen, maybe the earlier you spice something, the better it gets. So now you get a new marker that's
your tokens on the spice.
Yeah, you get even more. Your tokens, your cooked tokens maybe could start to go on the spice, and then you know that it's like extremely spiced well, those kinds of things. So anyway, there's a cooking of the meal that goes on in real time. That gets passed around as the people man the table and pay attention to the. So we're just kind of talking and helping out. And he's like, okay, how's my beef doing over here? I need some broccoli. Oh, carrots just came up here. I could throw that into the salad and add an extra component. And then once the meal is done, you basically present it. You say, all right, I'm serving to you guys here. You name it, of course. You name, this is my famous, charbroiled.
Filet mignon Steve.
If I know anything about cooking, if you just say the ingredients and what you did to them, it sounds way fancier. This is just a life tip for anybody listening.
And so you do all of that, and then you guys say, I loved it, or I hated it, and then you give basically cash based on your degree of success or failure as the cook. You do that for a while. You go around and around. You try to narrow in on people's tastes, really start to nail it, and then at the end of the game, we all award our special, I really liked this thing that you did, like you were the most entertaining chef for sure, these kinds of things. And then you calculate all of your money plus probably a modifier from those cards that you got, and
then
you win.
Lose.
Yeah. Somebody wins or loses.
Yeah, and I think depending on how it gets tested or not, the time element when cooking happens, like if you separate the collection and the cooking phase, which I think could make it way cleaner.
Yeah.
Even whether it's literal time, sort of like in Cabin Sonar, or we're all cooking, and we all know we're cooking, right? We're having fun. It's like, I'm putting my broccoli on, smiling, and then it's like, I'm actually serving sushi and I don't need to cook my meat, so I surprise you, I'm done with my meal. But like, we're just watching each other and managing how fast we're making stuff and what we're making. And then, you could have it where Jonathan finishes, and then we have a certain amount of actions to finish, just because it's, instead of having like a literal time that's going on, it's like me having to manage my board state against yours.
That's all relative, and that makes it way cleaner too. You don't, especially if you're thinking of components to include, you don't have to include any of that.
Yeah, so that way it's like I'm cooking my food,
That's
and like I'm watching what you're making too, because like if I have a 18-step meal, that could maybe score a lot of points, but like at the same time.
And that would actually make sense with the ingredients too, because if I have, for instance, like a flank steak and a prime rib, like this would probably say, 3 heat units to tender, like to doneness, and this would be like 8, because that's a cook for a much longer time. So you have to get that. It's cheaper, but you have to get it on earlier. So you make a risk, because if Zach's a 5-turn cook kind of guy, and my flank steak takes 8, then it's like, oh man, that's the benefit of the nicer cuts of meat and the nicer foods. They cook faster, because you don't have to like slow cook them to get them tender.
But they're more expensive.
Yeah.
You could also leave it on the grill longer for well done, medium, etc.
And
which is also a taste.
Might have a taste,
yeah.
And I think even in whether it's the equipment or if there's to me, a certain amount of technique is fun.
Yeah.
Where it's like the realization of like, you might be good at, you know how to make sushi, or you know how to do whatever, and it's like, I can cook my meat faster. Or there's a grill that cooks it faster, where it's like there's a super special grill that's 3 units of heat a turn.
Yeah.
Or up
Provides
to 3 units
up
of
to
heat.
3, yeah.
And it's like, oh, now I can actually cook the 10-hour steak versus the...
That's fascinating.
1
Let's
hour
do it
thing.
that way. I like the relative time thing going on. So basically, it would be a turn, is what you're saying. Everybody would have, whenever we're all ready to clock out, then that's 1 turn, and then we put all the stuff on, do what we need to do, and then we do it again.
So
is that the idea?
My thinking was, you have the taste, and then a turn is, you have a phase that is buying stuff, and then you have a phase that's actually making the meal.
Yeah.
And so there's a phase where you're getting your equipment and you're getting your ingredients and whatever. And then when we get to cooking, it's like, all right, well, you can see that I have a grill and a wok and this. And it's like, all right, I get an action. I'm going to put the rice on the wok.
Oh, I see.
You get an action. Then when it comes to my turn, it's like, if the rice is on the wok, it gets a token.
Yeah.
And then it's like,
cool.
now I'm going to put the steak on the grill.
Oh, yeah, and then
And
it's
then-
like, oh, that's a prime rib, dog.
And then,
he could be doing rice and steak. It's old-fashioned rice and
That's
steak.
right. But, anyways, so, and then you're watching, and it's like, I'm looking, and it's like, John's making a peanut butter and jelly. Like, it's going to
ready.
be, he just wants to clock out of this round, because
Yeah.
he got the peanut
With
butter and the
cinnamon.
jelly, with the cinnamon, that's right. Make it a toast first, cinnamon toast with peanut. Anyways, and you're watching, and then it's like, I know, by watching John, it's like, he's about to clock out. And when he clocks out, I get 5 more actions to finish my meal.
Yeah.
And then we finish our meal. It is what it is. And then we get points based on taste or whatever. And it's like, obviously, if meat isn't cooked, it goes away. And you can have rules on, like, if rice isn't done or if it's overdone.
That's it.
And you can
That's
have preferences and tastes on, like, prefers food burnt.
Yeah.
Prefers food raw. Prefers steak specifically raw. And, like, you could go to the moon with that one.
Is it a case, and this is kind of the final nail for me, what is the incentive to cooking bigger and more elaborate meals? And I think what you would solve this with is you can serve anybody up to 2 or 3 of the items that you have prepared. So I might want to prepare 6 items to send 3 to Jonathan and 3 to you, because I know you have very different tastes. Whereas somebody who only cooked 2 or 3 would have to serve those to both people. And so by spending more time cooking a wider array of dishes, you take a risk, you're not going to be done in time, but you're able to better pinpoint flavors to specific people.
Yeah, you
Does
could
that make sense?
also
Yeah.
you could also, another way to kind of accomplish a similar thing would be like, I'm imagining, let's say we each had like 5 taste things, and like the reason you would want to do more things is that maybe each player gets to award 1 money for each taste, and it's like, or a certain amount of money for each taste, and the more of my taste that you hit, the more money that I get to award you,
Yeah.
or like whatever the case may be. I'm trying to
Yeah, just
pinpoint that.
Yeah. Well,
Because
there
you
would
need
be
diversity.
You need a reason to make the more complex meals.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there could be, one, if you hit a taste, it's +1 money. If you miss a taste, or like, if you don't eat fish and you serve fish, it's -1 money or something like that.
Yeah.
That would be easy to do. So before we get completely away from this, let's drill down on what we think are the most fun parts of this experience.
Of this game. Yeah. To me, okay, there's a couple of things that I envision when I think of the game. One is the art or the style of the game has to be the kind of game that when you're playing it, you get hungry. Like, it needs to look that good. It's not like a cartoonish kind of thing. It's like, oh my goodness, I am
Look at that steak.
interested in this meal, right, as a human being.
So we're
as a
hiring
machine.
Magali for the art.
Yeah, it's the Magali steaks, yeah. So I think the actual experience of the game, part of the fun is just simply seeing all the different foods as they come out and how people put them together. But I think the most fun, the sellable mechanic of this is the relative cooking time thing that's going on. Paying attention to the other players, you have to be so aware of the other players while they're cooking and what you're going to be serving them. So you have to be so aware, it really connects the table, that you have to pay so much attention to everybody else, what they're doing and what they're tasting, and what they're saying about the foods that they like or they don't like.
I also think the buying of food and equipment and even learning new techniques potentially is very fun. Where it's like, trying to find a way to apply cinnamon. Like even the idea of like cinnamon on fish. And it's like, this is not something that you probably do, but like cinnamon adds +2 whatever.
Right.
And so like, I'm gonna grill with some cinnamon. And it's like this like funny interaction or just the hilarious meals that will come about.
Yeah.
Where
Yeah.
it's like, I don't even know, peanut butter pizza or you
And
got what you got.
maybe you have ideas then for where you might take this into your own life. Or maybe it's an element where you can learn some of the actual cooking basics.
Yeah.
Like how does a wok work?
The flavor on it could be hilarious too, right? Where it's like cinnamon is great on these 3 things.
Yeah, you could give it a...
And yeah, you could have keywords on cards, and if cinnamon is paired with any of these keywords, it gets, plus.
Absolutely.
You start to
so there's kind of a
multiply
learning
spices out, so you
effect.
You could learn the spice combination, because that's really all that cooking
Yeah, which is
what
really
works
cool.
together.
Which is really cool.
That
And
would be really neat.
I also think the hidden information is probably the reality of like I make a meal and then I put it out, right? And there's skill in like preparing the meal and timing it right and getting it off the grill correctly, which is like feels like an accomplishment in real life and in the game. But then it's like, all right, well then I got 0 money, and it's like, what do I do? Or like maybe I got 3 from you, and now I'm trying to figure out why did John just give me money? What was it about my meal? And I think over several turns it will start, and then I just know that moment will happen where it's like I think I've got you pinned. I make a meal, and then it's just
No, get it away.
out of there.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. I do think the making sure everything comes out on time, I think that is the part about cooking that this game really speaks to, that is probably its biggest selling point, and the hidden information as well. I think those 2 things, whatever combination ends up accomplishing those 2 things and really like letting those 2 things shine particularly, I think is going to be the fun.
Yeah, and actually, as we added there at the end, I think adding the like this ingredient goes with this thing, and this thing gets cooked on this thing. That is just super useful information.
Yeah.
Like
it would also be good to say like this is preferred. Basically, you would get maybe a bonus or something, but you could also cook a steak in a wok if you have to. Right?
Sure.
If it's that time and it's like I need to get this done now, I'm transferring it from the grill to the wok because it adds more heat to it, and it may not be as good. But I
got it done.
The meal done.
I got the meal out the door.
Out the door.
Well, there you go.
Well, what's the name of this thing?
I'm great at names. Let me think about this one.
No idea. No idea.
Meat meta is always fun just to say. I don't think
Well,
it's
you know,
really
Grill
good
in
on-
USA.
I mean, I think
Grill
you have
USA.
like the Great American Grill Off. You have.
It is. I mean,
even though the Europeans and in fact I think world over, potentially as good at barbecues as we are. When I was overseas, they were always.
So you were in Belgium, and they're like, they know that stuff. They eat fries and they barbecue.
That's true. I think barbecues the world over are happening. Spain, etc. They've been everywhere.
It could be called cooking by the book.
We are drawing a lot of elements from Cutthroat Kitchen, so potentially there's a licensing deal there.
Yeah, there we go.
You know what? This whole thing could be licensed. This is the best thing. Theme mechanics. We can talk to what's the name of those grills?
Weber.
Oh my gosh.
Weber.
Weber grills. We can talk to like
It could be a collectible
a grocery
game,
store.
like
We
the
can talk
90s.
to Amazon now through Whole Foods. It's like this is just the Whole Foods game.
Oh, goodness.
Lord Almighty. All right. Well, I think we did it.
Yeah.
Conceptually, that's there.
There's something there.
There's
That's
a
actually
game
kinda
there
fun.
that could be made and tested.
Yep. And that
If-
has no
if-
existing copyrights on it.
If we ever decided to do that.
And we could go. It could become spell crafting. It can become like witches with
Witches brew
kettles. It
and-
could be anything. We can make that happen.
Well, there
So,
you go.
It'll be fun.
take it as you like.
Indeed. All right. Well, any last thoughts before we get to the best time of the show? Which
The best
is
time?
Question
Answer
time.
time?
You know what? No answers this time. Just questions. If you're unaware, you can use the hashtag AskCovenant. We'll answer your questions right here on the show. We're going to start with Caleb Vance on YouTube. He says, you guys seem very optimistic about gaming and focused on community. Do you think the tone among gamers is optimistic? And do you think people are switching focus from games to the gaming community, or is it just you guys? Also, I'd like to see you design a game about philosophers fighting each other.
That'd be so cool. That reminds me of that Monty Python skit where they're playing soccer. It's so funny. Have you seen that?
I've seen it, but it was a long time
Oh
ago.
my gosh! Like the game starts and they just start walking around and pondering, and then eventually he makes a break. It is so. I will show you that after this podcast.
I need to watch that.
Stephen actually kind of wrote his thesis on that at one point. Where Lao Tzu punches Shuangzi. I think there's some kung fu. One of them turns into a dragon. There's a spirit bomb.
This is not true at all.
Wait,
I did
thought
run
this
a
was
paper.
Dragon Ball Z.
I did the final project was you pick 4 philosophers. But it was Confucius, Chuangzi, Lao Tzu, and
Krillin.
Mozart.
You're just killing it here.
And they all you write a narrative about them all meeting and then discussing their philosophical views in a narrative form rather than a kind of more academic form.
That's actually really cool.
Extremely useful and valuable. This is a really good paper too.
Because you have to like understand how they would talk.
Yeah, best thing I've ever written for sure. You have to argue every side of it all at once.
Sounds
It's
awesome,
really nice.
actually.
Optimism about gaming, very focused on community. I think tone amongst gamers is optimistic. Here's what I'm going to say. I think that the tone amongst gamers universally is incredibly optimistic, incredibly human, focused, wholesome, etc. I think the majority of negative comments that you see are exclusively on the internet, exclusively in these kinds of like smaller communities where you have one person who just feels the need to, be super negative about things, complain about things, get a rise out of people, troll people, whatever it is. The nonsense, right? Completely just a waste of time. But as far as like actual people actually playing games, fantastic. As far as YouTube comments, Facebook groups, etc., you just take that or leave it, because you've always got to consider the percentage of people that are willing to do a thing or engage in a thing, the percentage of people that are willing to then be in any kind of an online community about that thing, and the percentage of people who are willing to leave a comment about anything. And as you narrow it down, the people who are willing to leave a public comment, I think would skew more towards the negative end of the spectrum than the positive, because if everything's great, you're just less likely to talk about it, right? Like you're less likely to say, hey, I really love this content, or hey, I really love what you've done here. You just read it and go, oh, that's a good point. You move on. If you disagree, though, you read it and you feel like you need to be vindicated. You need to have an outlet for this outrage of what this person has done.
And it's very natural to get to the point where you're leaving a comment of any kind, or to dialogue in this way. You'd have to be really excited or happy or satisfied with something, or the complete opposite. Yeah. So you only really see the extremes, I think, as particularly online. But like if I hang out in the store a lot, and it's like it is not reflective of like all of the internet discourse about tabletop games. What is happening actually
on the ground?
Which is part of what makes tabletop games so great, is that you have a group of people with shared interests who ultimately want to like interact with other humans. Ends up being pretty good interactions.
As they connect. I mean, negativity goes away as you learn more about people, meet more people, get different perspectives that aren't just these kind of like two sides of this giant fighting coin. Instead, you get people together, and it's like, oh yeah, that's great. And in fact, I just read an article about the exchange program that was happening between the U.S. and other countries, and that so much of the power of that program was designed to create peace across boundaries. That the thinking was, if you experience someone else's perspective, for instance, if you have a Muslim that lives with you for a couple of years during high school or whatnot, somebody from Syria, it doesn't matter what it is, that you immediately change your perspective of those kinds of people, nationalities, situations, the world in general. So it's true, that's what happens in gaming communities too. As you get people of different backgrounds, different beliefs together, it's like, oh yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that perspective, but I love my friend John over here, and he's, he thinks like that, or he believes in that. So it's great.
Which then opens the door for, meaningful discourse.
Yeah.
When you do disagree, which is
actual
cool.
meaningful discourse.
And I think the real power in that, and the real power in tabletop, is that face-to-face coming to the table, literally, and seeing each other as human beings. That it just doesn't work on the internet. That's the thing I think this generation is learning, and I think the next generation may even know intrinsically, is that we don't do well as human beings with just words on the screen.
Just avatars and
we
words.
do, but we
you
do
lose
awesome.
so much.
We do
It's
awesome
too
when you're
easy,
looking someone in the eye. I mean, the Worlds, I think particularly this Star Wars Worlds, was a really good reminder of what the community is actually like when you get down and put cards on that table.
Cool. All right, question number 2. Jesse Olson from Twitter asks, what are some steps a new IP could take to help its theme capture an audience? Do you think a codex or a novella would help?
Oh my gosh, that's fascinating.
Yes.
That is fascinating. So, but really though, like, so how do you take your universe and make it something that interests other people?
Well, Go ahead.
Step one, you let other people play in it.
Okay, so you set the rules.
You set the rules and you
here's what
say,
it is.
this is a playground for you. You go and, I mean, that's one of the cool things about Star Wars, and one of the reasons why it got such popularity is that every single one of those background characters was allowed to be elaborated on by the fans. And eventually it was made into canon, it was taken away from canon. That's a whole different story. But it was open enough so that people's imaginations could go in there and play around. So number one is that if you have a codex that allows people to do that, if you have novellas that like help people into that, that's going to help quite a bit. Because people are looking for those playgrounds, and especially once you leave the reins a little bit and let them really get into it, I think that's a good thing to do.
The other thing, though, is what is your IP bringing to the table that makes it more fun to play in than a similar IP?
Just like we did with the game just now, what's the fun parts of it? Where is the fun? And then maximize people's understanding and appreciation of that.
Like if you're doing a fantasy setting with dragons and sorcerers and whatnot, why am I going to do that instead of the easily available, whether it's D&D or anything else, worlds that I can already play in? What are you bringing to the table? I remember I was just talking about this the other day. One of the first Burning Wheel settings that I did was a really quick kind of, IP, I guess, which was, it all centered around this very focused situation where you had a massive city with giant walls and people that had not stepped outside of those walls in so long that they didn't know that there was anything outside of them. And so that, while being a fantasy setting with rogues and scoundrels and swords and whatnot, still had something that was worth exploring. It's like, well, what is outside of the wall? And is there anything outside of the wall? And what are they hiding? And why would anybody go there? Or should they? And these kinds of things. So that's something that helps an IP too, is some kind of a central problem or exploration that the universe is offering, a conflict, if you will.
In the dungeon crafting articles in Dragon Magazine back in the day, which I cut my teeth on, one of the things that I thought was very helpful was that everybody, everything in every setting has and needs to have secrets. You need to have stuff to discover. In Steven's example, it was what's outside the wall. Why haven't we gone outside the wall? And those questions engage you and
encourage you to dive further.
It's the exploration aspect.
Humans love frontiers.
Yeah, I think for me it's having some hook that is like an anchor of understanding. For me, like the thing that immediately came to my mind was Westworld, which is a show that recently aired, and it's like I get the Western theme. I also get the humans and non-humans theme, and it was I had enough to understand, and then they created this whole world around it, right? It was like basically Western and then humans and non-humans. How does this play out? And it's this huge world to go explore. I think that was where I was going to go with it. It's just like I understood the concept up front, right? Even the rogues and things with the city, and it's like, and then understanding what it would be like to explore the city. And I think things like a codex or a novella help to do that, but even I'm thinking back to the spoils, and it's like there's this massive universe with no support whatsoever.
Yeah.
But like in the game, you could start to construct who the characters were and what they were about and how they kind of fit into this overarching story, and they kind of led you along through that.
Final thing that I'll say is the Torchbearer doing this, basically creating a system in which fan adventures, fiction, etc., can become part of the canon, if you will, of the system. I think that's actually for Burning Wheel. It was one of the two. But Luke basically said, here's the system, here's the universe, given some guidelines, submit your adventures that you've written to us, and we will officially put them in here's a list of all the Torchbearer adventures that you can go on, one-shots, 5 trip long campaigns, that kind of stuff. And so you then get to crowdsource out people playing in your world that then start to actually flesh it out.
That's cool.
In ways that you didn't even see. So you set out the guidelines, and then you watch as this universe actually develops, as an actual world would, out of your control.
And then you have ambassadors for your game who've submitted content and want other people to enjoy that content. It kind of spreads out from there. The other thing, my final thing, would be to keep at it. It is the amount of things that will just happen if you consistently push, even if it takes years and years, is staggering. So continue to write, or, have novellas, have codexes, try different things, make sure it's there, make sure it's out there, and give it some sort of base, and slowly grow your audience. Sometimes that's all you can do. It's just the hard work.
That's usually what you can do. All right, well, if you're listening, I would love to know, what would you like us to talk about on the next episode of the cast?
Ooh, wide
That's
open.
the question.
Just
What would you
open it up.
if you could hear us talk about anything, what would it be? We'll be back next week. Until then, keep playing.